welcome to our webinar, Modernizing Compliance Without Disrupting the Business, the Always-On Compliance Approach. It reflects a challenge many compliance and financial crime leaders are navigating today. So today's conversation will focus on three main areas. We're going to be discussing the limits of legacy compliance systems. We're going to be talking about how AI is improving operational efficiency, and we will also talk about always-on compliance in today's evolving landscape. My name is Lala Hosseini, and I'll be your moderator for the webinar. Before we begin, I would like to mention a few housekeeping notes. So this webinar will last approximately 45 minutes, and it will be recorded. And we encourage you to send your questions throughout the webinar. Please post them in the chat and we will reserve time at the end to address them. Now, I'm pleased to be joined by an excellent panel of experts today. Charmian, Marcus, Hugo, welcome. Great to have you with us today. If we could start with brief introductions, please tell us about yourselves. Charmian, maybe we start with you.
Excellent. Well, good afternoon, everybody. Good morning for where you're joining us. My name is Charmian Simmons. I am a fin crime and compliance expert with SymphonyAI. I've been with the company about 5 years, but really my experience comes as a practitioner working in investment banking for the majority of my career, working across the risk domains as well as technology, first, second and third line. So I come with a wealth of experience and really happy to be engaging with you today.
Thank you, Charmian. Marcus, should we move with you?
Absolutely. So thanks for having me. I'm Martinez, industry advisor, part of the worldwide financial services team at Microsoft. I've been with Microsoft over 6 years now, advising mainly banks across EMEA. And my background is consulting. I used to work for EY in the past, so it's great to be connected with Hugo here. And yeah, looking forward to the conversation.
Great. Thank you, Marcus. Hugo?
Yeah, so hi everyone, I'm Hugo Matos. I'm a senior manager from the technology consulting practice here at EY. I have worked all my career in the compliance and AML space, focused specifically on the technology side, but my main areas of expertise has been delivering transformation, innovation projects, and also focusing on the operational excellence in the compliance and AML area. So happy to be here talking about this subject.
Great, thank you all, and great to have you on board with us today. So let's dive into our new topic. Charmian, let's start with you. Please tell us, what do you see in terms of new trends in the market?
Yeah, I think this is really relevant to kickstart off today's webinar, largely because we have had a little bit of a shift from last year coming into 2026 and what some of those trends necessarily are. Now, in today's webinar, we're really going to hit those first three trends here that you see from left to right. What's really been happening with AI, and in particular, agentic AI and the movement to AI agents? What we're seeing around some of that convergence between AML fraud and how we're seeing more of an integrated anti-financial crime stack, and what does that mean when we're talking about all the risk signals coming together? And really on that third point, the regulatory divergence, we're seeing a lot of regulations starting to come into play this year, others that are being updated and enhanced. But in certain regions, we're also seeing a little bit of a pullback, particularly in the US, where we're seeing just a little bit of movement, a little bit of relaxing of what they're doing, but that doesn't necessarily mean that overall from a operational, an efficiency and effectiveness perspective, that cross-border wise, we can necessarily relax all the rules. So we're going to sort of touch upon these three areas. That fourth area there, stablecoins, really, really relevant one to talk about today. However, we probably don't have enough time to it, and that might be a separate webinar topic if you guys are interested in hearing about it and what's going to happen in that particular side of things. But what this really sort of takes us into from a trends perspective is, well, what's happening with the IT investment that's necessarily going on, and what is the industry saying? So some information that we have here is actually a survey report from Celent Research. It's what they did towards the end of last year. They surveyed about 230 financial crime leaders across the world. And I think this is a telling story. It sort of sets the scene for what we're going to be talking about today. Now, if you look at the top 3, perhaps even the top 4, look at what's actually being prioritized for where spend is going to happen this year. Data management sits there at the very top of that list. It's really closely followed by AI, and it's probably no surprise that those two are linked together because we need good data, we need clean data and a good data ingestion layer for AI to actually function correctly, to function accurately, but also to bring and integrate together the right type of information to produce the right type of outcomes that we're looking at. And it's probably also, thirdly, no sort of mistake that, anti-fin crime fits in there in that bucket, because it is an area that is growing in terms of innovation and how it is being used to create operational efficiency, operational resilience even, as well as driving more effectiveness and proactivity across the market. So I think these things are really, really prevalent and sits outside of, SymphonyAI, Microsoft, EY. This is very much independent research that's, fueling what we're seeing coming forward into 2026.
Thank you, Charmian. Marcus, I will turn to you next. Please give us your perspective on current tech stack used by financial institutions.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, no, I think it's a good starting point. I think these data points really show, what would be the focus for the next few years. So I think there are 3 elements to consider. So when you talk about the performance of legacy applications, I think it's the idea that the data investment was raised before is so important, because the legacy platform wouldn't have a modern data state that is required to be, let's say, interrogated by AI. So when you think about AI adoption and agents, there's a huge pressure on modernization of data states. So when you think about compliance specifically in AML, there's a lot of unstructured data. So if you rely on the, let's say, legacy infrastructure, you wouldn't be able really to leverage all the AI benefits. So that's one of the reasons why legacy platforms really underperform. And there's an element of, you can really adopt AI to deliver, let's say, efficiency. If you know, for example, how to prompt or how to create an agent, you can save time and get some insights, but it doesn't scale. So to this point that the AI overlay, there's a ceiling in terms of how you can really deliver unlock value with AI. And again, it goes back to the aspect of the data side of things, because for agents and AI to perform at enterprise level and deliver value, there's a whole element of context engineering, which means that agents will need the right context to make the right decision. And again, that is supported by the excellent perspective that Charmaine just mentioned earlier. And when you say that legacy, isn't built for intelligent compliance, I think that's an inflection point in the industry. So the market volatility and the market uncertainty is really driving a new regulatory agenda. And as an industry, we cannot afford to be on catch-up mode. It needs to be a real-time perspective in terms of how the market is evolving, what kind of vectors are being created. So in the same way AI is delivering great value for us as professionals, it's also providing bad actors with another vector of attack as well. So we do need AI in order to be more efficient in terms of anti-money laundering and compliance. So I think perhaps there are more reasons we can definitely expand on that, but I will just stop here and say, Hugo, do you want to add anything? There's anything you'd like to expand on these points?
Thanks, Marcus. So yeah, I do, because I want to bring those limits of legacy applications to life with a real case. Okay, so like in many organizations, we had a project where we started delivering a compliance solution, and because we already had all the requirements, all the rules defined, we even started with a rules first approach. Okay, and this was something that we were used to build, and it worked. But as we were testing the solution, it was clear to the business that it was not providing value. Okay, it was they were not getting any additional value from what they already had, and this was not the goal of what we intended to build, because we wanted to build actual value, actual operational efficiency, actual results that the business would improve the day-to-day of the business and the experience. So we went with an AI overlay. We worked with, as you mentioned, Marcus, we worked with limited context, because with an AI overlay, you're not working on the whole context of the data that you have underneath. And even if you are lucky to have a good data platform with structured data, if you are just putting an AI overlay on top, you'll not get the full context. So even with that scenario, we were still not getting the full benefit that we are trying to achieve. So essentially, we're still having this close to the same number of false positives. And even for the more complex cases, analysts would still need to do essentially the same time that they spent before, even with the AI overlay helping them to make those decisions. So we had to pivot, we had to change completely. Definitely having an AI native solution that just sits on top of all the data that you have and has all the context that you need really unlock the value that we were trying to find. So once we got to that point, we were actually providing, for even the easier cases, all the information, all the results that the analysts need to process those cases. So there was indeed a very good result in terms of handling time and false positives for easier cases, but even for the complex cases, because of the whole context that these solutions can have when you have the right prompting and the right outputs, it gives you a very good increase in terms of quality and efficiency, because you are working with really good outputs if you're able to develop those actual prompts and those actual outputs. So essentially, this for us was very interesting use case. It opened also our eyes to why we need to pivot to different approaches. So definitely having this context aware AI enabled us to scale in that scenario. So this is a very good example of where we were.
Okay, thank you, Hugo. You actually make quite a good point there. Rules first, even with AI overlays, can't keep pace. So let's continue on that topic a little bit. And we see many organizations are already introducing AI in various forms and shapes, also into compliance workflows. But how AI is implemented really varies significantly, and so do the outcomes. So Marcus, if I may come back to you again, so if you could shed a light on how embedding AI at the core enables outcomes versus incremental updates.
Yeah,
Upgrades.
absolutely.
So, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. No, thank you. So I think it's important to understand, what are the key components of agents. So there are many definitions available in the market. Perhaps most of them are quite technical. So what I'm trying to convey here is basically a non-technical view of what an agent platform looks like. So an agent, you can think about almost like an orchestrator with a few components. So many things can trigger an agent to action. So assuming there's a human in the loop, because an agent could be fully autonomous, but assuming there's a human in the loop, it can be activated by voice, by message, by email, by other applications. Now, what really is important in terms of ensuring a good agentic implementation is to really give a job description to an agent. It's a very different way to think about it, because we think about agents as something like it's developed by technology. But actually, the most important aspect of an agent is really to give it like a role, a job description. Outside the agent world, we say that's a prompt, but effectively that is just a set of instructions. The second building block of agents is also the knowledge. So that's where the compliance conversation is so important, because you can give all instructions you want to the agent, but you do need to give it like a knowledge base to really ground the reasoning of the agent into factual data sets. And that could include numerical data, but could also include many regulatory documents. So that's important. And the other thing, it's about tools. So for every agent, you need to really specify which tools the agent will be able to use. So if you consider all these building blocks, one of the consequences of organizations adopting AI agents is basically the challenge of rethinking processes outside the linear flow. So when we think about process automation in any part of the business, we tend to think about steps being executed sequentially. That doesn't apply to agents, because an agent is almost like is a person that can make different calls and can make decisions on the fly. So there's an aspect of a different dynamics in how agents work. And also, the agent can really memorize previous steps, which ensures that the next step is really consistent with the previous one. So there's this adaptive aspects of agents that really amplifies the gap against legacy platforms that we showed earlier. So when you think about organizations, breaking new ground, that's really how they are thinking about. It's not necessarily putting agents or AI on top of existing process, but actually creating agents that can pretty much perform like teams with very clear job descriptions. So hopefully that gives a little bit of a perspective on how to think about an agent. Hugo, we're just discussing earlier, and you want to add a few things here. So what's your point of view?
Yeah, so I really like the explanation that you made, and I think it's very clear. But for me, I got hooked when you talked about the challenges that you have when you're actually implementing them, because even when you think from a compliance and AML perspective, you are basically putting an AI agent on a process that will eventually be reviewed from a regulatory perspective. And it's true, I agree completely that these agents will help to speed up a lot how you put them doing processes that were usually done by humans, because they already have the context. If you give them the right prompt, they'll not do a step-by-step, they'll know how to react. But definitely, if you're trying to replace someone, I see also other challenges, right? Not only how you calibrate the prompts that you need to give to the agents, because you'll need to think about the metrics that you usually measure, like what are the false positives that you're getting with the agent versus a human, then the false negatives, the accuracy of the information that they are inputting, the consistency. All these metrics are very important to measure in the ML space. Also, we have other aspects that we tend to use that help us tackle these challenges, like parallel runs are very useful when you have a different sets of data and you can do parallel runs together. You can find actually inputs that will help you to calibrate the agent, because eventually in the end you just want to calibrate the agent to be as working as effectively as possible. And once you have this final calibration, that's where you usually see the main value. But for me, Marcus, I think these challenges are also very important, even given the aspect that we are bringing here, the AML, that is very demanding from a regulatory perspective. I think this is an area where definitely testing is very important as well.
Yeah, good shout. Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you, Hugo, Marcus. That great insights, definitely. So this brings us to the always-on compliance part. And Charmian, I'm going to turn to you. Please tell us more about it.
Yeah, I think always on compliance is really an interesting way of thinking about how we've always done compliance, really. And coming back to the topic of today's webinar, we're talking about modernizing it without disrupting the business processes, and thinking about how all these things tie together. A lot of this is about how do we bring a lot of information together? How do we turn it into intelligence? How do we operationalize it to create that resiliency, but also to be able to manage the challenges that Hugo and Marcus just spoke about? Innovation is one way to do that, and we sort of heard that with sort of that AI native approach. But I think where we're really hitting home on the always on compliance and the risk intelligence is about how do we bring together these certain signals that come into play. So if you look here on the left-hand side, you can see we've got global regulations in that blue. those are always an evolving sort of landscape for how we think about things. And some teams, have one person or people that are dedicated to looking at how that's going to impact their operations, how it's going to impact their, risk appetite, and what it's going to do to their customer base or how they grow as an organization. But equally on the complete opposite side of the screen in the red, we've got a number of threats and vulnerabilities that continue to bombard us as criminals get a lot more smarter, as they change their tactics, as different vectors about how they operate start moving, not from just a criminal perspective, perhaps an organized crime group, something as a service, crime as a service, laundering money as a service. All of these things start to culminate. And in order to modernize properly and in a way that is sustainable, but also a way that allows it to strategically move forward with how we optimize processes, controls, and the technology like AI innovation, we need some of these things to really come together. We need to build what you see in the bottom right, that operational knowledge of how everything functions. We heard Hugo talk about things like consistency, understanding what it's actually going to deliver, the accuracy of it. We need that operational knowledge to be able to help bring that modernization and these particular components together. But equally, we need the client data. We need the cleanliness, the understanding, the relationships, the entity relationships around that data to be able to pull together. And the reason that all these pieces need to sort of feed together is for that bottom center area. We need it to be regulatory compliant. We want it to be easily understood by regulators, even our auditors, whether they're our own third line of defense, our internal auditors, or whether they're the external side. We want to be able to explain it, which means everything needs to somehow feed together in one kind of way. And the way that SymphonyAI thinks about it is always on compliance is almost like our underlying foundation that sits beneath our products. And it's what we consider brings together anything around AI readiness, so the context view of what we do, plus it brings together any of the detection. So how do we think about what we know, the known knowns, but also how do we think about the unknown knowns into that, and what do we do around predictive and models to be able to bring that to the surface and be smarter in how do we actually look for different crime patterns, how do we bring things and surface things, but also do it in a much more effective way, a much more efficient way that drives some of that operational efficiency. And then really we want to be able to orchestrate all of that in such a way that we're either utilizing the right types of predictive, analytical AI, generative AI, and agentic AI in a layer that actually can talk to each other, it can manage each other, it can perform quality assurance, it can do those things that Marcus was talking about before in terms of I need to check what I want to be able to do. I need to understand the context that I'm delivering. I am going to be outcomes based and focused. These are some of the controls, the governance that sits within there to be able to bring these together across the different domains that make up what we call financial crime. So your KYC, your AML, your sanctions, etc. And all of these things really do need to almost form in a cyclical pattern to be literally always on in terms of the compliance side. And these things are sounds so fundamental to how we would probably operate. And when we put our risk management hat on, these things become the technology layers that help this thing become a living, breathing, technology platform that continues to infuse how we do this better. But I'm interested to hear what some of my colleagues also have to say about, always on compliance in this particular industry as well. I mean, Microsoft always has a very interesting view on how it brings technology. What do you guys see in terms of this?
Yeah, I think it's a new construct. So we used to think about compliance, onboarding, risk management as something you do, one point in time. And I love the concept of always on because it's exactly where the world is going with AI, and also, just because of the market volatility and the need to be, compliant, 100% of the time. One thing I would call out from our experience with the Copilot adoption across the market is that kind of construct create a pressure on the way professionals use technology. So to your point about operational knowledge, that creates a need for all of us to be better at using AI, and that means be better at using prompts. So prompt engineering is, I think, it's not a great terminology because it looks very complicated and very difficult. But actually, in our experience, people that are really pushing AI to think hard about complex problems typically are getting really, really good results. So as a rule of thumb, so if your prompt today is for less than 2 pages long, perhaps you're leaving value on the table. So the operational knowledge side of this chart, I think, is really important, but does require the human side to be, very well articulate and clear in terms of what you're expecting from the tool. So I think that's what I would call out. So this always on compliance, it also needs the human side of things to be upskilled in order to acquire this new skill, which I think is new for most of us. So yeah, that's I think what I would add to the conversation. I don't know, Hugo, do you have any other thoughts?
Yeah, so I mean, I completely agree. We see everyday scenarios where our teams and the clients we work with, they find new areas where they are improving just because of the way that they are evolving their use of AI. So it's a very dynamic space that we're living on right now, but it's very important that we focus on how we use it, because definitely the technology is there, but we are not always adapting at the same pace. So I feel like that is where we really need to make sure that we are adapting at a faster pace, because like you mentioned, the example about the 2-page prompt is very it hits right next to home, because every day we see people that feel like just a one sentence is enough. But when you put together not only those specific examples, but how teams and clients are adapting to these technologies, there is definitely a lot of space to cover, and bringing these new concepts like always on compliance will definitely help them understand the value that we are unlocking with this technology.
Well said.
So definitely. Thank you, everyone. So that actually brings us to our Q&A part of the webinar. Reminder for the audience, if you have any questions, please do add them to chat. This is the right time to address them. But in the meantime, we have received several interesting questions from the audience during the registration. So if we take a few of them to address, I think the first one actually came for Charmian. So how fast do you think compliance teams are moving with AI currently?
Oh, that's interesting. I think there's a sliding scale when it comes to AI adoption. And if I think back to a survey that SymphonyAI did, towards the end of last year, it's very current. What we really saw was that the pace of adoption has very much shown us that people are really into exploring what AI can actually deliver. So we've said the word value a lot today on the call, and that's because there's no point in putting something in place if it doesn't give value, if it doesn't give a return on investment at the end of the day. And I think if I cast my mind back to that survey, we had about 80% of people say that in 2026 going into 2027, about 80% of them are either going to innovate within their own IT teams, they're either going to innovate with a particular vendor, or they're going to try to build, data science function within their own compliance area in order to start looking at how they better analyze, how they better use prompts, how they better understand their own data in order to build that risk intelligence. So I think that's quite a telling statistic if we just start with something. Some other statistics that I recalled from that survey was, well, where are they putting that? If they're going to be innovating in that particular space, transaction monitoring probably came in at the top mark. And the reason for that is they're all tackling a problem. So they're looking for a problem to be able to solve, and false positives and being able to manage the detections, to be able to manage what's actually happening in that is probably the biggest value add area that comes forward. I think it was sort of closely followed by around about sanctions and fraud were almost equal in terms of how the AI could be used, whether it's predictive, whether it's generative, or whether it's much more advanced now in terms of agents. So say, for example, in the sanction space, it could be a sanctions and evasion agent that actually looks for the evasion techniques that we can't necessarily easily see within the data. It's able to pull that information together and present that up, look at the complexities of it and be able to pull that forward. And then we're starting to see other areas around like quality assurance, being used to help QA what's actually happening in the space and how good the outcomes are, how accurate they really are, because a lot of this is coming back down to explainability. It's coming down to that non-negotiable about having accurate outcomes, but also being highly explainable, particularly to a regulator. They want to be able to understand it, but also I would say to your own board, to your own management team who hold the ultimate accountability.
Thank you, Charmian. I think we have one question in the chat. Dominic's asking, do you have any experience digitalizing org charts, i.e. transforming PDF org charts to an ownership structure that can be implemented into IT systems? Anyone would like to take this question, please?
I think it's an interesting use case. I don't have an experience on translating org charts into systems, but it's something that an agent or LLM could do, translating this kind of documents into something that's more digestible. But to my point earlier, it really depends on the quality of the prompt, because if you think about compliance, most of the data is in several long documents in text format. So you can definitely analyze the document using LLMs, but the quality of the analysis will be highly dependent on the quality of the prompt. So the org chart example is an interesting one. Definitely something that's doable, because that's one of the superpowers of LLMs, to look at unstructured data and charts and images and even videos and audio and make sense of that. So it's achievable. It all depends on the quality of the prompt. That would be my take on that.
I'll chime in on that as well. So
Yeah.
I think this is probably from the context of KYC, CDD, trying to understand what UBO structures or something like that is probably perhaps maybe the context of this. So yes, you can use a particular Copilot to sit there and do that. The LLMs are quite good at scanning documentation. If you give it the correct prompt to say, look at these org charts, can you convert them into an ownership structure? In the ownership structure, I'd like you to have a look at the client file. I'd like you to look at the entity relationships. I'd like you to look at the PEP structure. I'd like you to factor in anything that's come in around the adverse media notions that we have linked to that particular risk profile, and document that out. It can very much do that. Now, what I will say is I don't think we have written a particular agent that would do exactly that feature, but one of the actual components of one of the SymphonyAI's latest systems, SRI, actually has an agent orchestration layer. And in that agent orchestration layer is a build your own agent. It's one of the, I suppose, distinguishing features that you don't often see out in the marketplace, because people want to just write you an agent and sell you an agent. We give you that capability. We give you all the guardrails, the tooling to be able to write that agent to do that exact specific task. So what you're saying and what you're asking about is actually some of the flexibility of the tooling that exists today to allow you to work better, to work smarter, to be able to get the right type of answers in a lot more of an effective, efficient time. And then you can also use like a QA agent to sit there and go, can you check that work? Tell me what it's done. Have a look through the audit trail and the audit log to validate how well it actually did that task. It learns. I think Mark has said it before, it adapts. So you can continue to teach it with reinforced learning. So that's where a QA comes in. That's where a human comes into the loop as well. So these things are very easily tasks that could do. And quite honestly, I could probably give that to our R&D team, and they would probably write that agent probably in about 2 days for you and have it ready for you to test. So these things are very much doable and practical for today.
Yeah, if I may also add here, because it's a very interesting subject, because if you think in the past how it was done, you had to use specific models and train them specifically on specific formats, which was a pain, because whenever you get something new, something different, something from a different regulatory body, it would just not work. But when you see the outputs that you receive today from the AI systems or the agents that we have now, they are completely adaptable. They have high levels of confidence in their outputs. It's really a space where you can bring a lot of operational value, also because a human processing these documents takes a long time, but an AI agent will do this in seconds, right?
Okay, Thank you, speakers. While we have you here, on that question, Hugo, there is another one that came for you. It's regarding the case study, that use case that you mentioned earlier. And so the question is, what was the main insight that triggered the pivot to an AI native approach?
Yeah, so there were a lot of insights. I guess now that looking to how we were working and to how we were measuring the value of the solution, it's really clear that we were not getting that we're not heading in the right direction. But really, the main insight is you need to feel like you're getting value which you've never gotten before. And what I mean by this is usually in the past where you implement solutions that are rules based or they are automation based, you do get some value, you do get some efficiency. It's definitely it was definitely a space where you could measure value. But right now, where we are and with the capacity of the technology that we have at our disposal, with all the agents that you can configure to do these processes, all the context that they have, and the way that they produce outputs with really good quality, you need to actually feel that you're getting a lot more value than you ever have gotten. Okay, so I think the main insight is you need to set your expectations as high as you can. Okay, and try to land wherever you can, because that's really the technology that we are right now. It's underexplored. We see every day new capabilities that blows everyone's minds on how can you do it now, and you couldn't do this in a couple of years ago. So it's definitely trying to set your expectations as high as possible and try to get as much value as possible, because the technology is there. We just need to make sure it's configured, calibrated, with all the right context, and you'll see the results coming from them.
Thank you, Hugo. There's a question that says, Marcus earlier mentioned vectors of attacks. So what are the new vectors of attacks that we're seeing recently?
When you think about adoption of agents, one of the new use cases that we have seen emerging, mainly on the commerce space, is the initiation of payments by agents. So that's not a mainstream use case, but many of payment processors are reporting that the payments initiation now is following a new pattern. So when you think about an agent initiate payments, there's a whole new arena of conversation of, okay, there's nothing wrong with an agent making a payment, but who made the authorization? Who gave the consent? So there are many implications about empowering agents to take action. So that's a consumer or a commerce use case. When you think about a bad actor, so a bad actor would have access to open source models and be able to create similar kind of use cases. So that's one that I think is a quite interesting one. And it's creates a whole new debate about compliance and financial crime controls. And I think it's an interesting question because reinforces the slide that Charmian just presented about being always on, because that's the new reality. The old construct about financial crime is that there's someone sitting behind a screen trying to do something bad. So this construct is expired. Now these people can build agents, can try to do bad things 100% of the time. So it's another compelling reason to why always on compliance is something that's not a differentiator anymore. It's just table stakes. So yeah, hopefully that is a tangible example.
Thank you, Marcus. I think we have one last question, enough time just to take one last question. And there's a question that says, where do we actually start with agentic AI? So who would like to take this question, please? Where do you start with agentic AI?
I would give two factors to consider. So look at your operating model. So whatever area you are working at the moment, looking at the operating model and ask two questions. So one question is about agentic exposure. So which parts of your operating model are dealing with unstructured data, repeatable, does require not so complex judgment. So typically, there are some areas that will be, I would say, highly exposed to agents. And the second question is about economic returns. So to what degree there's a volume in these activities? That's something that is being done frequently. What's the quality of the data? So if you could create an agent, how that would stack up against a human doing that activity. So if you think about the intersection between these two things, high agentic exposure and high economic returns, I bet you end up with a very small set of capabilities that will give you your best shot in adopting AI. So that would be my perspective.
I'll add to that. I'll sit there and say, start small, but think big. I think this is one of those areas, if you're not already on the AI journey and you're already on that train that's sort of left the station, it's hitting down to be a bullet train. It's about picking up a particular problem, almost like the example you gave there, saying, look, I need to take some PDF charts. I need to create orders, ownership structures. I want to be able to check they're actually correct. I want to be able to then consume them internally in my organization. It's looking at a problem first, looking at whether there's an AI solution that can actually best deal with it. If it is, what is the right type of AI to put into place? And then scale from there. Once you get that confidence and you can prove the proof points, so go back to what you've just said there, Marcus, like where am I going to get return on that investment? You start to see where the other dimensions are that you can sit there and utilize AI to its best advantage to create the right type of outcome, to do repeatable tasks, to sit there and take on complex areas that take a long time to do or a lot of individuals to do, but be able to gather that and present that up in the right way and have it on a sliding scale. Like, do I need to have the human in the loop? Do I need to have a human in command at some point to be able to make an adjudication or a particular decisioning point? Or is this something that is in the lower risk side and I can actually automate that through with an autonomous agent to do that particular task, and I can free up my staff to be able to do the more complex, more riskier things that takes on board? We're also seeing a huge increase in terms of now the agentic AI payments, the initiation. We're going to start to see a lot of things unravel in terms of new challenges that come on board. We've really addressed a lot around responsible AI, from design to development to putting things into practice. We've got a lot of safety guardrails that sit there to secure around how the tooling and the governance works around AI. So there are a lot of things that are already there and set up, ready to go. It's going to be about where some of those new challenges are and how far the technology and how far criminals work that is going to be that next leap in terms of how do we do it. But that's just evolution. That's just how, innovation works. That's how the world is moving. So it's about us keeping pace with it and, thinking smart, being on our feet, but also being really, risk savvy and always on in terms of the compliance approach we take.
Okay, thank you. Thank you to all the speakers. As a final note, I would like to add one question from me. If you had to summarize the main takeaways from today's webinars, please. So what would it be?
For me, I'll say it's the always on compliance side. It's now a non-negotiable. It's just something that's almost required, and it's going to be a lot easier to do once you make that first step into sort of the AI journey and being able to see everything more holistically to bring information and risk intelligence together.
Yeah.
Thank you, Charmian.
I would say that when you think about AI adoption, don't underestimate the reasoning capabilities of LLMs. So don't be shy in asking very complex and hard questions to LLMs. You'll be surprised with the level of answer you get when you push LLMs to the limit. So that would be my takeaway.
Thank you, Marcus. Hugo?
Yeah, from my side, I think, we talked a bit about some of the challenges that you might have, and we even touched base on items like responsible and AI, but the main point is you need to have explainability. You need to be able to explain what you're doing and know exactly what it's behind, but that shouldn't stop you from innovating. So definitely now is the time to find those best use case and try to find how to best adapt an AI system behind it to make your lives easier.
Thank you. Fantastic. So that brought us to the end of our today's webinar. I'd like to thank our speakers, Charmian, Marcus, Hugo. Fantastic to have you on board today. And thank you for all of you who joined and contributed with discussions. If you have any additional questions, please feel free to reach out to us directly at connect.fs@symphonyai.com. For any additional information, please visit all the websites given here for Symphony, for Microsoft, and for EY.com. For now, stay well, and hopefully we see you in our next webinar. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.